What name did your family force on you that nearly ruined your life? My real name wasn't Richard. It was just Dick. Dick Johnson. My parents were obsessed with Dick Van Dyke. Not like casual fans, but the kind of people who owned every movie, every episode of his shows, had posters in the living room. When I was born, they decided naming me Dick was the ultimate tribute to their hero. They didn't name me Richard and use Dick as a nickname. Dick was my actual legal first name on the birth certificate. They thought it was classic, timeless, a name that would make me stand out. My dad's last name was Johnson, and apparently it never occurred to them what Dick Johnson would sound like to literally anyone else. When I was little, it didn't matter. Kids in elementary school didn't fully get it, but my parents would tell everyone about how I was named after the legendary entertainer, and people would smile awkwardly and change the subject. I didn't understand why until middle school started. 6th grade was when everything fell apart. First day of middle school, the teacher called roll. Dick Johnson? The entire classroom exploded. Kids were laughing so hard some of them were crying. One kid literally fell out of his chair. The teacher's face went red. From that moment on, I became a walking punchline. Every introduction was a nightmare. This is Dick Johnson would send people into hysterics. The jokes were relentless and got exponentially worse as kids got older and understood exactly what my full name sounded like. Every single day, every single class, every hallway interaction was torture. I begged my parents to let me go by my middle name, James. It was right there, normal, safe. But Dad would get this disappointed look and say, Dick Van Dyke never ran from his name. He owned it. You need to own yours. Mom would add, it's a strong name, a classic name. You'll grow into it. I didn't grow into it. I shrank from it. By 7th grade, I stopped introducing myself. When teachers called on me, the class would erupt. I started eating lunch in the library to avoid the cafeteria where the jokes were constant and crude. Someone wrote, Dick Johnson was here, on the bathroom wall with an arrow pointing to a urinal. The principal said it was just kids being kids. 8th grade was worse. The school had my legal name in every system. Every substitute teacher, every school assembly, every announcement over the intercom. Dick Johnson, please report to the office. The entire building would hear it and lose it. I got shoved, tripped, had things thrown at me. Someone started a petition as a joke saying free Dick Johnson with deliberately crude undertones. It got 200 signatures before a teacher confiscated it. I tried going by just DJ for my initials. For about 3 weeks it worked with my friend group. Then a substitute in math class looked at the roster and said loudly, Dick Johnson? Is Dick Johnson here? While grinning. I walked out, just left school, got suspended for 3 days. My parents were furious, but not at the situation. Dad yelled about how I was being weak, how Dick Van Dyke faced adversity with grace. I locked myself in my room and didn't come out except for meals. High school as a sophomore was unbearable. I was 15 and starting over at a new building, but my reputation had followed me. Within a week, everyone knew about Dick Johnson. The jokes were cruder now, more explicit, more targeted. Kids would yell my full name in the hallways just to watch me cringe. I wore the same hoodie every day, hood up, and avoided eye contact with everyone. I stopped going to classes I didn't absolutely need for graduation. I started skipping lunch entirely, just sat in my car in the parking lot. At home, I barely spoke. My parents kept insisting I was being dramatic, that I'd thank them one day when I understood what a strong, memorable name I had. They genuinely couldn't see what Dick Johnson sounded like to everyone else. I applied to an art program at a university 3 states away using the name James Johnson. My portfolio was good. They accepted me conditionally, but when they requested my transcripts, the names didn't match. They flagged my application for fraud. I had to explain the situation in writing. They were understanding, but said I had to resubmit everything with my legal name for verification. By the time I did, the scholarship deadline had passed. I lost $40,000 in aid. I stayed home that year, worked at a grocery store, and saved money. On my 18th birthday, I walked into the courthouse with $200 I'd saved from my paychecks. The clerk at the name change office tried not to smile when she read my paperwork. She'd probably seen worse, but Dick Johnson was definitely up there. I filled out the forms, paid the fee, and waited. My parents found out when the court notice arrived at the house. Mom cried, not because she understood what I'd been through, but because she felt I was rejecting them, rejecting their love for Dick Van Dyke. Dad didn't speak to me for a week. The judge approved it in 10 minutes, asked me why I wanted the change. I told him I'd spent my entire childhood being bullied because of it, that it had cost me scholarships, that I couldn't introduce myself without people laughing at the full name Dick Johnson. He stamped the papers without hesitation, said, I don't blame you one bit. I walked out of that courthouse as James Johnson and I cried in my car for 20 minutes. For the first time in my life, I could say my full name out loud without people losing it, and it felt like I could finally breathe.